She couldn't breathe. He didn't ask questions. She never knew his name, until it was too late to run. I was falling. The subway car spun, bodies pressed together. No one reached out, except him. Strong arms, expensive fabric, cedar and danger. Then my sleeve rode up. 4 finger-shaped bruises, yellow and purple. His entire body went rigid. Who did this? I tried to lie. I fell. You fell. He knew. He'd seen this before. When's the last time you ate? The question broke me. Yesterday. Maybe. He muttered something in Italian. Then, Leon, bring the car. We're getting off. Wait, I don't even know you. My name is Dominic Castellano. I didn't know he was a mafia boss. I didn't know his mother died from bruises just like mine. I didn't know that 12 hours earlier I'd been just trying to survive another shift. But I knew this. I was drowning, and he was offering air. Do you want to go home? The answer was no. Home was a cage, and Tyler held the key. What happened next changed everything. But to understand why that moment on the subway meant life or death, you need to see what my life had become. What Tyler had turned me into. My locker wouldn't open. 3 tries before the combination finally clicked. My fingers clumsy with exhaustion I could feel in my bones. The hospital had been running at capacity all week, which meant everyone worked double shifts whether they wanted to or not. I wanted the paycheck. Needed it, actually. With rent due in 5 days and my account showing numbers that made my stomach twist, I pulled my jacket from the hook, catching my reflection in the small mirror inside. Hollow eyes stared back at me. When had I started looking this worn down? I closed the locker before I could answer that question. Hair pulled back in a messy bun that had started neat 14 hours ago. The emerald green sweater I'd changed into hung loose on a frame that had lost too much weight too quickly. I'd stopped buying groceries 3 weeks ago. Easier to grab whatever the hospital cafeteria was throwing out at shift change. Cheaper to skip meals entirely when the alternative was going home. Home. The word tasted bitter. That studio apartment in Brooklyn wasn't home anymore. It was a cage. And Tyler held the key. What I didn't know was that this would be the last night I'd ever walk into that cage. The last time Tyler would have that kind of power over me. I shouldered my bag and headed for the exit, nodding goodbye to Rhonda at the reception desk. She'd worked nights at the hospital for 20 years, knew every nurse by name, always had a kind word. Tonight she looked at me with concern. I pretended not to notice. You okay, honey? You look pale. Just tired. Long day. The lie came easily. I'd been practicing it for months. Outside, November wind cut through my thin jacket. I should have grabbed my heavier coat this morning, but Tyler had been passed out on it, reeking of whiskey and rage from whatever had set him off the night before. Better to freeze than wake him. The walk to the subway normally took 15 minutes. Tonight, it felt like miles. Each step required conscious effort, my legs heavy and uncooperative. When had I last eaten? Yesterday morning, maybe. Half a protein bar from the vending machine. My stomach had stopped growling days ago, replaced by a hollow ache I'd learned to ignore. My body was shutting down. I just didn't realize how close I was to complete collapse. Rain started as I descended the subway stairs. Light at first, then heavier, soaking through my jacket before I reached the platform. Perfect. Just perfect. I stood shivering as water dripped from my hair, watching my breath fog in the underground chill. The platform was crowded despite the late hour. Manhattan never really slept, and neither did its subway system. Bodies pressed together. Everyone trying to stay warm, stay dry, stay invisible in that particular way New Yorkers perfected. Don't make eye contact. Don't engage. Just get where you're going and mind your business. Dizziness hit me as the train pulled in. I grabbed the pole, steadying myself as passengers surged forward. The motion, the noise, the press of bodies. It all felt overwhelming. Suddenly, my vision grayed at the edges. Get on the train, Julia. Just get on the train. Get home. Lock the door. Survive another night. I pushed forward with the crowd, finding a spot near the middle of the car. No seats available. Not that I expected any. I wrapped my hand around the overhead rail, gripping tight as the train lurched into motion. The swaying made everything worse. My empty stomach rolled. Sweat broke out on my forehead despite the cold. I focused on breathing, counting inhales and exhales like they taught us in nursing school for managing anxiety. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Except my body wasn't cooperating. The counting scattered. My grip on the rail loosened. I was going to faint. I recognized the signs professionally even as I experienced them personally. Tunnel vision, nausea, weakness spreading through my limbs like water. Not here, not now, not in front of all these people. But fate had other plans, and the man standing 3 feet away was about to change the course of my entire life. The train took a curve too fast. Or maybe it was normal speed, and I was the one spinning. My hands slipped from the rail. My knees buckled. I fell, but I didn't hit the ground. Strong arms caught me, pulling me against a solid chest. My head lulled against expensive fabric that smelled like cedar and something else. Something warm and masculine and completely unfamiliar. I've got you. The voice was deep, calm, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place through the fog in my head. I tried to speak, to apologize. To explain that I was fine and didn't need help, but the words wouldn't come. My body had shut down, exhausted beyond function. Through half-closed eyes, I saw him. Dark hair with a slight wave, sharp features, eyes so dark they were almost black, focused on me with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow wasn't. Tattoos crawled up his neck, disappearing into the collar of a burgundy blazer that fit like it had been made for him. He was tall, I realized. Even crouched, I could tell he was well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered in that blazer and dark shirt that screamed money. "Miss, can you hear me?" His hand moved to my face, fingers gentle as they checked my pulse at my throat. Professional, careful. I managed a weak nod. That's when everything shifted, when he saw what I'd been hiding for months. That's when his gaze dropped to my arm. My sleeve had ridden up when he caught me, exposing the inside of my forearm, exposing the bruises. His entire body went rigid, those dark eyes fixed on the marks. 4 distinct ovals in yellow and purple, finger-shaped, unmistakable. I saw recognition flash across his face, not confusion or curiosity. Recognition. Like he'd seen this before, like he knew exactly what those bruises meant. Who did this? His voice had changed, still quiet, but there was steel underneath now. Something dangerous lurking beneath the surface calm. I pulled weakly at my sleeve, trying to cover the evidence. "I'm fine, just clumsy. I fell at work." "You fell." He didn't believe me. The way he said it made clear he knew I was lying. "When's the last time you ate?" The question caught me off guard. Today. Earlier." "Try again." He adjusted his hold on me, keeping me upright as the train continued its journey. "And this time, don't lie." Tears pricked my eyes. I didn't cry anymore. I'd trained myself out of it months ago, learned that crying only made Tyler angrier. But something about this stranger's directness, the lack of judgment in his tone, cracked something inside me. "Yesterday," I whispered. Maybe. What I whispered next would seal both our fates. He muttered something under his breath in another language. Italian, maybe. Then he spoke over my head to someone I couldn't see. Leon, bring the car to the next stop. We're getting off. Wait! I tried to push away from him, to stand on my own. I can't. I don't even know you. My name is Dominic Castellano. He said it like it should mean something to me. When I just stared blankly, something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. And right now, what you need is food, water, and somewhere safe to recover. I can provide all three. I have to go home. Even saying it made my stomach clench with dread. Do you want to go home? The question hung between us. Simple, direct, impossible to answer without revealing everything I'd been hiding. I didn't know it then, but my answer would determine whether I lived or died. Whether I stayed trapped in Tyler's cage, or finally broke free. The train slowed, pulling into the next station. Dominic stood smoothly, lifting me like I weighed nothing, one arm under my knees, the other supporting my back. I should have protested, should have demanded he put me down. Instead, I let my head rest against his shoulder, too tired to fight. This is kidnapping, I mumbled. This is helping. He stepped off the train onto the platform. There's a difference. A man appeared beside us, tall, broad, with a face that suggested he'd been in his share of fights. He wore a dark suit and an earpiece, moving with the kind of alertness I associated with bodyguards. Car's waiting, sir. His accent was thicker than Dominic's, definitely Italian. Good. Let's go. They moved through the station with purpose, Dominic carrying me while Leon cleared a path ahead. People stepped aside automatically. Whether from Dominic's commanding presence or Leon's intimidating bulk, I couldn't tell. Probably both. The rain was coming down in sheets when we emerged onto the street. A black SUV idled at the curb, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Leon opened the rear door and Dominic slid in, still holding me. Wait. I tried one more time to protest as the door closed, sealing us inside. You can't just... Breathe. Dominic settled me on the seat beside him, his hand steady on my shoulder. You're safe. That's all that matters right now. Safe. When was the last time I'd felt safe? The car pulled into traffic. I watched streetlights blur past through the window, my mind struggling to process what was happening. I should be terrified. This was every warning I'd ever received about strangers and danger and trusting the wrong person. But as Dominic retrieved a bottle of water from somewhere and pressed it into my hands, as he draped his jacket over my shivering shoulders, as his dark eyes watched me with concern rather than threat, I couldn't find the fear I knew I should feel. Drink slowly, he instructed as I fumbled with the cap. Small sips. The water was cold and perfect. I hadn't realized how thirsty I was until the first swallow. I wanted to gulp it down, but his hand on the bottle kept me from drinking too fast. Where are we going? My voice sounded stronger now. The water was already helping. My home. I have a doctor on call who will examine you. I'm a nurse. I don't need a doctor. Nurses make terrible patients. There was almost warmth in his tone. You know that as well as I do. He wasn't wrong. I'd seen enough nurses ignore their own health while caring for everyone else. While I sat in that car, Tyler was waking up in our apartment, realizing I wasn't home, and his rage was about to reach a dangerous new level. The SUV turned onto Park Avenue, pulling up to a building that screamed money. Doorman, marble lobby visible through glass doors. The kind of place I'd never afford in 10 lifetimes. I looked down at my wet clothes, my dirty sneakers, my bruised arms still partially visible. Then at Dominic in his expensive clothes and confident demeanor. I don't belong here. You're here because I brought you here. He opened the door and stepped out, extending his hand to help me. That means you belong. I took his hand. The decision felt monumental and inevitable all at once, like stepping off a cliff or into a new life. Maybe both. As I stood on shaking legs, the world tilted again. Darkness crept in from the edges, my body finally giving up the fight to stay conscious. The last thing I remembered was Dominic's arms catching me again, his voice low and reassuring as everything went black. I've got you. You're safe now. If this story is touching your heart, if you've ever felt trapped by someone who was supposed to love you, go ahead and subscribe. Join our family of hope and healing, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because Tyler represents something we all need to fight against: the toxic belief that love means control. Let's share this journey together. But before I could wake up in that luxury penthouse, before I could even begin to understand what Dominic Castellano was offering me, you need to see the hell I was living in. The cage Tyler had built around me, bar by bar, day by day. The alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., same as always. I hit snooze twice before Tyler's voice cut through the darkness. Get up. You're gonna be late. No concern in his tone, just irritation that my alarm was disturbing his sleep. I dragged myself to the bathroom, avoiding my reflection until I had to look. The woman staring back wasn't someone I recognized anymore. 27, but looking 40. Dark circles no concealer could hide. Hair that used to be shiny now dull and lifeless. I pulled it back into a bun and told myself I'd get more sleep tonight. The same lie I'd been telling myself for months. The hospital was a 15-minute walk I usually enjoyed. Fresh air, time to myself, mental preparation for the shift ahead. But lately, even that small pleasure had disappeared. Every step felt like wading through concrete. Rhonda was already at the nurse's station when I arrived, reorganizing charts with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for 2 decades. She looked up and her smile faltered. Julia, honey, you okay? Fine, just tired. I signed in, checking the patient roster. 12 patients on my floor today, 6 critical. You've been just tired for weeks now. She lowered her voice. Is everything all right at home? Home. That word again. Everything's great, I lied, and her expression told me she didn't believe it. But she nodded anyway, because that's what people do. They accept the lies because the truth is too uncomfortable. Rhonda had no idea that her question, that simple, caring question, would haunt me for hours. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Nothing was all right at home, and it was getting worse. The shift blurred together. Mrs. Kowalski in 412 needed her meds adjusted. Little Jackson in pediatrics had finally stopped crying long enough to let me check his vitals. Mr. Chen in 408 held my hand while I explained his test results, and I felt like a fraud. How could I comfort others when I was falling apart? I was good at my job. That was the worst part. Competent, compassionate, professional. Patients requested me specifically. Dr. Patel commented that I had excellent instincts, but none of them saw the way my scrubs hung loose. The bruises hidden beneath long sleeves. The fact that I'd eaten exactly 1 protein bar in the last 36 hours because my stomach had learned to stop asking for food. Lunch break came at 1 p.m. I sat in the break room with a cup of coffee, watching other nurses eat sandwiches from home. Normal people with normal lives. Rhonda offered me half her turkey wrap. You need to eat something. I ate earlier. Another lie. She frowned but didn't push. My phone buzzed. Tyler. Where are you? At work, I typed back. Don't be late tonight. We need to talk about the rent. My stomach clenched. The rent he'd gambled away last weekend. The rent I'd somehow have to cover with my paycheck, even though it was already stretched too thin. I put the phone face down and finished my coffee, cold now and bitter. That text message was a threat disguised as a conversation, and I knew exactly what "we need to talk" really meant. The afternoon dragged. My feet ached. My head pounded. Jackson asked why I looked so sad, and I forced a smile. "Not sad, sweetie, just thinking." "About what?" "About how brave you are." That part wasn't a lie. By the time my shift ended at 6 p.m., exhaustion had settled into my bones like lead. 14 hours. The extra hours meant extra money, but it also meant going home. To the apartment that wasn't home. To Tyler and his whiskey and his questions about where I'd been and who I'd talked to and why I was looking at him that way. I stood in front of my locker, combinations suddenly complicated. 3 tries before it opened. My reflection in the small mirror inside showed hollow eyes that belonged to someone else. I closed the locker quickly, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the exit. November wind cut through the thin fabric. Tyler had been passed out on my good coat this morning, reeking of last night's rage. Better to freeze than risk waking him. I walked toward the subway, each step heavier than the last. When had I last eaten? Yesterday morning. Maybe. My stomach had stopped growling days ago, replaced by an ache I'd learned to ignore. I couldn't keep doing this. The thought came unbidden, unwelcome. But what choice did I have? No savings, no family, nowhere to go. I was trapped in the slowest drowning imaginable. But I didn't know that in less than an hour, a stranger with dark eyes and careful hands would pull me to the surface. And tonight, like every night, I'd go home and pretend everything was fine. What happened next on that subway would set everything in motion. The collision of 2 broken people. One who'd learned to survive abuse, and one who'd spent his whole life trying to prevent it. Rain started as I descended the subway stairs. Light at first, then heavier, soaking through my inadequate jacket before I reached the platform. Perfect. Just perfect. The platform was crowded despite the late hour. Bodies pressed together, everyone trying to stay warm, stay dry, stay invisible in that particular way New Yorkers perfected. Don't make eye contact. Don't engage. Just get where you're going and mind your business. Dizziness hit as the train pulled in. I grabbed the pole, steadying myself as passengers surged forward. The motion, the noise, the press of bodies, it all felt overwhelming. My vision grayed at the edges. Get on the train, Julia. Just get on the train. Get home. Lock the door. Survive another night. I pushed forward with the crowd, finding a spot near the middle of the car. No seats available. Not that I expected any. I wrapped my hand around the overhead rail, gripping tight as the train lurched into motion. The swaying made everything worse. My empty stomach rolled. Sweat broke out on my forehead despite the cold. I focused on breathing, counting like they taught us in nursing school. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Except my body wasn't cooperating. The counting scattered. My grip on the rail loosened. I was going to faint. I recognized the signs professionally, even as I experienced them personally. Tunnel vision, nausea, weakness spreading through my limbs like water. Not here, not now, not in front of all these people. The train took a curve, or maybe it was normal speed and I was the one spinning. My hands slipped from the rail. My knees buckled. I fell. Strong arms caught me before I hit the ground, pulling me against a solid chest. Expensive fabric that smelled like cedar and something warm, something masculine and completely unfamiliar. I've got you. The voice was deep, calm, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place through the fog in my head. I tried to speak, to apologize, to explain that I was fine and didn't need help, but the words wouldn't come. My body had shut down completely. Dominic Castellano had caught hundreds of things in his life. Deals, opportunities, enemies trying to escape. But catching me? That would change him in ways he never saw coming. Through half-closed eyes, I saw him. Dark hair with a slight wave. Sharp features that could have been carved from stone. Eyes so dark they were almost black, focused on me with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow wasn't. Tattoos crawled up his neck, disappearing into the collar of a burgundy blazer that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. "Miss, can you hear me?" His hand moved to my face, fingers gentle as they checked my pulse at my throat. Professional. Careful. I managed a weak nod. That's when his gaze dropped to my arm. My sleeve had ridden up when he caught me, exposing the inside of my forearm, exposing the bruises. His entire body went rigid, those dark eyes fixed on the marks. 4 distinct ovals in yellow and purple, finger-shaped, unmistakable. I saw recognition flash across his face. Not confusion or curiosity. Recognition. Like he'd seen this before. Like he knew exactly what those bruises meant. And he had. On his mother's arms. 12 years old, finding her broken and bleeding. A memory that would drive every decision he made from that moment forward. Who did this? His voice had changed. Still quiet, but there was steel underneath now. Something dangerous lurking beneath the surface calm. I pulled weakly at my sleeve, trying to cover the evidence. "I'm fine. Just clumsy. I fell at work." "You fell." He didn't believe me. The way he said it made clear he knew I was lying. "When's the last time you ate?" The question caught me off guard. Today. Earlier. Try again." He adjusted his hold on me, keeping me upright as the train continued its journey. "And this time, don't lie." Tears pricked my eyes. I didn't cry anymore. I'd trained myself out of it months ago, learned that crying only made Tyler angrier. But something about this stranger's directness, the lack of judgment in his tone, cracked something inside me. "Yesterday," I whispered. "Maybe." He muttered something under his breath in another language. Italian, maybe. Then he spoke over my head to someone I couldn't see. "Leon, bring the car to the next stop. We're getting off." "Wait." I tried to push away from him, to stand on my own. I can't. I don't even know you." "My name is Dominic Castellano." He said it like it should mean something to me. When I just stared blankly, something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. "And right now, what you need is food, water, and somewhere safe to recover. I can provide all 3. I have to go home." Even saying it made my stomach clench with dread. "Do you want to go home?" That question would echo in my mind for days, because it was the first time anyone had asked what I wanted. Not what I should do. Not what was expected. What I wanted. The question hung between us. Simple. Direct. Impossible to answer without revealing everything I'd been hiding. The train slowed, pulling into the next station. Dominic stood smoothly, lifting me like I weighed nothing. One arm under my knees, the other supporting my back. I should have protested, should have demanded he put me down. Instead, I let my head rest against his shoulder, too tired to fight. "This is kidnapping," I mumbled. "This is helping." He stepped off the train onto the platform. "There's a difference." The last thing I remembered before darkness claimed me completely was his voice, low and certain. "I've got you. You're safe now." I woke up in a world I didn't recognize. Luxury I'd never experienced. Safety I'd forgotten existed. And a man whose kindness felt more dangerous than Tyler's rage. Because it made me hope again. Sunlight woke me. Real sunlight, not the gray filter that made it through the dirty windows of my Brooklyn apartment. I opened my eyes to cream walls with gold accents, high ceilings that seemed to stretch forever. Windows overlooking Central Park from a height I'd never experienced. The sheets beneath me felt like clouds, impossibly soft. I was still dressed in yesterday's clothes, but someone had removed my wet jacket and shoes, placed them neatly by the door like they mattered. Panic should have set in. I was in a stranger's home. I'd let myself be taken from a subway by a man I didn't know. Every warning I'd ever received about danger screamed at me. But lying in that bed, warm and safe for the first time in months, I couldn't find the fear. A knock came at the door. "May I come in?" Dominic's voice. I sat up, suddenly aware of how I must look. Rumpled clothes, hair a disaster, still wearing yesterday's exhaustion. "Yes." He entered carrying a tray. In daylight, I could see him clearly. Mid-30s. Sharp features that belonged on a magazine cover, dark hair styled back with a few strands falling forward. Those intense brown eyes. The neck tattoos were intricate. Not prison ink, but expensive art that probably cost thousands. "How are you feeling?" He set the tray on the nightstand. "Confused. Where am I?" "My home." He gestured to the window. "Upper East Side. You've been asleep for about 12 hours. 12 hours. When was the last time I'd slept that long? 12 hours I'd been gone. 12 hours Tyler had been awake, calling my phone. His rage building with every unanswered ring. "Dr. Harrison examined you last night. With your permission, you were semi-conscious but responsive." He poured tea from a delicate pot. "Severe dehydration, malnutrition. Your blood pressure was dangerously low." I looked down at my hands. Thin fingers that used to be stronger. "I should go." "Where?" The question was gentle but firm. "Back to whoever gave you those bruises." My throat tightened. "It's complicated." "It's simple, actually." He handed me the cup. "You're here because you need help. Everything else we can figure out." A woman appeared in the doorway. Older, silver hair pulled into a neat bun. Kind eyes that had seen too much and still managed kindness. "This is Isabel," Dominic said. "She manages my household. She's brought you some fresh clothes." Isabel entered, setting a stack of folded clothes on the dresser. Soft pants in gray. A cream sweater that looked incredibly comfortable. "The bathroom is through that door, dear. Take your time. There are towels and anything else you might need." After they left, I made my way to the bathroom. It was larger than my bedroom. Marble surfaces, a shower with multiple heads, a bathtub that could fit 3 people. Towels so plush they felt like hugging clouds. I showered, letting hot water wash away days of grime and exhaustion. The soap smelled like lavender. The shampoo left my hair feeling clean for the first time in weeks. I stood under the spray until the water ran cold. The clothes Isabel brought fit perfectly. The sweater was cashmere, soft beyond description. I caught my reflection in the mirror. Still too thin. Still showing signs of exhaustion. But cleaner. Less haunted, maybe. What I didn't see in that mirror was the woman I was about to become. The one who would reclaim her voice, her strength, her life. Dominic was waiting in the dining room. Breakfast laid out like something from a restaurant. French toast, fresh strawberries, real orange juice that probably cost more than my grocery budget used to be. "Eat slowly," he said as I sat. "Your stomach needs time to adjust." I took a bite. The bread was fresh, probably from some bakery I'd never be able to afford. The strawberries were sweet and perfect. Each bite felt like luxury. "Why are you doing this?" I asked finally. He was quiet for a moment, studying me. "When I was 12, my mother was killed by her boyfriend. He beat her regularly for years. She hid it from everyone, including me, until the night he went too far. My chest tightened. I'm sorry. I recognize the signs now. The weight loss. The fear. The bruises in places usually covered. His jaw tightened. I couldn't save my mother. But I can make sure you have the option she never got. I need to go home. Even saying it made my stomach clench. Do you want to go home? The question again. And this time I couldn't hide behind lies or excuses. This time, I had to face the truth I'd been running from. The question hung between us. Because the answer was no. I didn't want to go home. I never wanted to go home again. But saying it out loud meant admitting everything. Meant facing the truth I'd been running from for months. I don't know, I whispered. Dominic leaned forward, his expression gentle but firm. Then stay. Just for today. Recover. Eat. Rest. We'll figure out tomorrow when it comes. I looked at the breakfast, at the sunlight streaming through windows, at this stranger who'd caught me when I fell and somehow knew exactly what I needed. Just for today, I agreed. One day became two. Two became three. And with each passing hour, the walls I'd built around my heart began to crumble. But what I didn't know was that Dominic was building walls too, to protect me from dangers I couldn't yet see. One day became two. Two became three. I kept telling myself I'd leave tomorrow, that I was just recovering my strength before making decisions. But something deeper was happening. Dominic was careful with me, gave me space but remained available, never pushed for information I wasn't ready to give. He worked from his study during the day, taking calls in rapid Italian that reminded me he lived in a world I didn't understand. But in the evenings, he was just a man who made sure I ate dinner, who asked about my day, who seemed genuinely interested when I talked about nursing. On the third night, we sat in his den. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, lights twinkling like stars. He'd poured himself whiskey, offered me tea. The silence was comfortable until he spoke. I need to tell you something. He stared into his glass. About why I reacted the way I did. On the train. I waited, sensing this was important. What Dominic was about to tell me would explain everything. His protective instincts. His immediate recognition of abuse. The rage I'd seen flash in his eyes when he first saw my bruises. When I was 12, my mother's boyfriend beat her to death. His voice was steady, but I heard the pain underneath. She'd hidden the abuse for years. I saw bruises, but I didn't understand what they meant. Thought she was clumsy, but believed her lies because the truth was too terrible to consider. My throat tightened. Dominic. I found her that night, after he'd gone too far. She was still breathing, barely. Kept apologizing, saying she was sorry I had to see her like that. He finally looked at me. She died in the ambulance. I'm so sorry. The words felt inadequate. I recognize the signs now, the weight loss, the fear, the way you flinched when I moved too quickly, the bruises in places usually covered. His hands curled into fists. I couldn't save my mother, but I can make sure you have the option she never got, a safe place to recover and decide what comes next. His honesty cracked something inside me. The walls I'd built so carefully started crumbling. His name is Tyler, I heard myself say. We've been together for 2 years. It started small. Controlling what I wore, who I talked to, checking my phone. I told myself it meant he cared. Dominic didn't interrupt, just listened with that intense focus that made me feel heard. For the first time in months, I was telling the truth. All of it. And the weight that lifted with each word was almost unbearable. The first time he hit me was 8 months into our relationship. I'd forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning. He apologized after, brought flowers, swore it would never happen again. I laughed bitterly. Classic, right? I'm a nurse. I know the statistics. I've treated women in the ER with stories just like mine. But somehow I convinced myself I was different. You're not different, Dominic said quietly. You're human. And he systematically broke you down until you believed you deserved it. Tears started falling. The first real tears I'd cried in months. The escalation was so gradual. He gambles away the rent, controls all the money, monitors my phone, explodes over nothing. 2 weeks ago, he threw a glass at my head, missed by inches. Dominic's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. And you stayed because you felt you had no choice. No savings, no family, nowhere to go. The words poured out now, unstoppable. I started skipping meals because it was easier than facing his interrogation about grocery costs. Picked up extra shifts because at least at the hospital, I was safe. But I was so tired, Dominic. So tired of being afraid all the time. He moved to sit beside me, careful not to crowd. You're not going back there. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until you choose to, if ever. It wasn't a command. It was a promise. Why do you care? I whispered. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're a nurse who works double shifts. I know you put others before yourself. I know you're stronger than you realize. His hand covered mine. And I know that if I let you go back to him, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. We sat in silence as my tears finally stopped. The city sparkled below us, millions of lives intersecting and diverging. Chance encounters that changed everything. Tell me something normal, I said finally. Something that has nothing to do with any of this. Dominic smiled, and it transformed his entire face. I'm terrible at cooking. Isabel has tried to teach me for years, but I burn everything. Everything? Last month, I set off the smoke alarm making toast. I laughed. Actually laughed. When was the last time I'd done that? That laugh, that single moment of joy, was the first crack in Tyler's control. The first sign that I was healing, that I could be whole again. We talked until late. About books we'd loved, movies that made us cry, what we'd wanted to be as children before life got complicated. Normal things that reminded me I used to have dreams beyond survival. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. The country house became more than just a safe place. It became the setting for something neither of us expected. Two damaged people learning that love doesn't have to hurt. That protection doesn't mean possession. The country house sat 40 minutes north of Manhattan, surrounded by trees that had turned gold and amber with fall. Dominic moved me there after a week, saying I needed space from the city, from memories, from the fear that lurked around every corner. He was right. The house became my sanctuary. Days developed rhythm. I woke to birdsong instead of sirens. Ate breakfast Isabel prepared with obvious love. Read books from Dominic's extensive library. Walked through gardens that someone tended with care. I slept without nightmares for the first time in years. Really slept. 8 hours straight. Waking naturally instead of jolting awake at every sound. My body slowly remembered what rest felt like. After 2 weeks, I told Dominic I wanted to return to work. Part-time, just 3 days a week. I needed the structure. Needed to remember who I was beyond this trauma. Leon will drive you, he said simply. No argument about whether I was ready. Just support. Rhonda's face when I walked into the hospital was worth everything. Julia, oh my God, we've been so worried. You look... She paused, studying me. You look like yourself again. I feel like myself again. It was true. The hollow-eyed woman who'd left 2 weeks ago was gone. I was still healing, still processing, but I was getting there. What I didn't realize was that Tyler had been at the hospital too, asking questions, watching, waiting for me to resurface. Work felt different now. I moved through my shifts with energy I'd forgotten I possessed. Patients noticed. Little Jackson asked why I was smiling so much. Mrs. Kowalski commented that I looked healthier. Even Dr. Patel stopped me in the hallway. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," she said. "We need you healthy and whole." Evenings at the country house became sacred. Dominic finished work by 6, emerging from his study with that particular looseness in his shoulders that meant he was done thinking about business for the day. We cooked together. Not fancy, elaborate meals, but simple food that required collaboration. I taught him my grandmother's cornbread recipe, laughing when he measured ingredients with surprising precision for someone who claimed to burn toast. "You're doing it wrong," I said, watching him stir. "There's no wrong way to stir. You're supposed to fold it, not beat it to death." He grinned, and something warm settled in my chest. When had I started noticing his smile? The way his eyes crinkled at the corners? The gentleness in his hands despite the controlled danger that lived beneath his surface? We watched movies. He subjected me to Italian cinema from the 1950s. Black and white films that required me to read subtitles. I made him sit through romantic comedies he pretended to hate, but watched without complaint. "This is unrealistic," he muttered during one particularly cheesy moment. "It's a movie. The whole point is escapism. Nobody falls in love in 3 days." I glanced at him, heat rising in my cheeks. Maybe not in real life. But we both knew the truth. Something was happening between us. Something neither of us had planned, but both of us wanted. Our eyes held for a moment too long. Something electric passed between us. Something that had been building gradually over weeks of careful proximity. The tension broke when his phone rang. Business. Always business. He excused himself, and I tried to calm my racing heart. One night during a storm, I found him in his study. The door was cracked open, and through the gap, I saw him standing by the window. Phone pressed to his ear. Even from behind, his tension was visible. The call ended abruptly. He stood there for a long moment, staring out at the rain before turning and seeing me in the doorway. "I didn't mean to intrude," I started. "Come in." He gestured to the chairs facing his desk. I entered hesitantly. "Are you okay?" "Business complications. Nothing that concerns you." But his voice was tired, strained in a way I hadn't heard before. I didn't ask questions, didn't press for details he wasn't offering. Just sat there, present and quiet. Minutes passed. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. Just waiting. Finally, Dominic moved from the window and sank into the chair beside mine, close enough that our arms nearly touched. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? I haven't done anything. For being here. For not asking questions or trying to fix things." He turned to face me. "For just staying." My hand moved before I could think about it, reaching across the small space to rest on his. His fingers were warm, slightly rough at the tips. They closed around mine immediately, holding on like I was anchoring him. In that moment, something shifted between us. We weren't just rescuer and rescued anymore. We were two people choosing each other. The storm raged outside, but in that study, something shifted, changed, deepened into something neither of us had words for yet. Dominic's free hand came up to cut my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "Julia." I leaned closer, just an inch, testing, offering. He kissed me then, soft and careful, like he was afraid of pushing too far. His lips moved against mine with a gentleness that made my chest ache. Nothing rushed or demanding. Just connection, pure and simple. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. I shouldn't want this. You're healing. You need time, not complications. Maybe you're exactly what I need. My hand slid to his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing under my palm. What followed was tender in ways I hadn't known existed. Dominic paid attention to everything. Every touch, every kiss placed with intention, making sure I felt safe and cherished with every breath. Later, lying in his arms, I felt complete silence in my mind for the first time in years. This was what healing felt like. But healing isn't linear, and trauma has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. What I was about to face in my dreams would force me to confront the truth I'd been avoiding. The nightmare came without warning. Tyler's voice, low and dangerous. "Where have you been?" The smell of whiskey on his breath. His hand closing around my arm, fingers digging into already tender bruises. "You think you can just leave? You think anyone else wants you?" I was back in that apartment. The cage, trapped and terrified and so small I wanted to disappear. Please. I just worked a double shift. Liar. His other hand rose and I saw it coming but couldn't move. Couldn't escape. I screamed. The sound ripped from my throat, tearing me from sleep into darkness. My chest heaved. Sweat soaked the sheets. The room spun, and for a terrifying moment, I couldn't remember where I was. The door burst open. Dominic appeared, moving fast but stopping just inside the threshold. He wore sweatpants and nothing else, and even in my panic I registered the muscular build, the tattoos visible on his ribs and shoulder. "Julia." He approached slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. "You're safe. You had a nightmare. You're safe here." A sob broke from me, then another. The dam I'd built over months cracked wide open, and I couldn't stop crying. Great heaving gasps that shook my whole body. All the fear and pain and exhaustion poured out in an unstoppable flood. This was the moment I'd been avoiding. The full emotional reckoning with what Tyler had done to me. What I'd allowed to happen. The bed dipped as Dominic sat on the edge, maintaining distance but offering presence. "Let it out. You're safe now." "I can't go back." The words tumbled between sobs. "I can't go back there. He'll kill me eventually. I know he will. But I don't have anywhere else. No family, no money saved. I'm trapped and I'm so tired of being afraid." "Then don't go back." His voice was steady, an anchor in the storm. "Stay here. Recover. Figure out your next step from a position of strength." "You don't understand. Tyler. He gets worse when he drinks. And he's been drinking more. Last week he threw a glass at my head, missed by inches." I wiped at tears with shaking hands. I thought about calling the police, but he's charming. He'd convince them I was being dramatic, and then I'd go home and he'd make me pay for embarrassing him. Dominic's hands curled into fists where they rested on his thighs. "What's his full name?" "Why?" "Because I'm going to make sure he never touches you again." The quiet certainty in his voice sent a shiver through me. Dominic Castellano was a man who kept his promises, and Tyler Brennan had just become the target of someone far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. "Just having somewhere safe to stay is everything," I said. "I don't need you to do anything else." "You're not going back there, Julia. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until you choose to, if ever." He stood. "Try to sleep. I'll be right across the hall if you need anything." He moved toward the door, and something in me panicked at being alone again with the nightmare residue. "Could you?" I stopped, embarrassed. "Never mind." He turned back. "What do you need?" "Could you just sit for a few minutes? I know it's stupid, but I don't want to be alone right now." "It's not stupid." He returned to the chair near the bed, settling in. Sleep. I'll stay. I lay back down, and the last thing I remembered before exhaustion claimed me was the solid presence of him keeping watch, making me feel safer than I had in longer than I could remember. Morning light woke me. Dominic was still in the chair, head tilted back against the cushion, eyes closed. He'd stayed all night. I must have made a sound because his eyes opened immediately, alert, despite the uncomfortable position he'd slept in. "How are you feeling?" he asked, embarrassed. "You didn't have to stay all night." "Yes, I did." He stood, stretching. "Coffee?" We sat in the breakfast nook as sunlight streamed through windows. The nightmare felt distant now, but its effects lingered. My hands still shook slightly as I held my cup. "I need to tell you something," Dominic said after a long silence. "About my world. About what I do." I waited, sensing this was important. What Dominic was about to admit would force me to make a choice. Accept him fully, darkness and all, or walk away from the only safety I'd ever known. My business isn't always legal. I have enemies. People who would use you to get to me if they knew you mattered. His dark eyes held mine. Being with me, it comes with risks. I considered this. The moral complexity of falling for someone who operated outside the law. The danger that might follow. Then I thought about the man who'd caught me when I fainted, who'd given me shelter without demands, who'd held me while I cried and stayed all night to make sure I felt safe. "I see you," I said finally. "Not just what you do, but who you are. The man who takes care of people. Who feels deeply even when you try to hide it. Who makes terrible toast but tries anyway." I reached across the table for his hand. "That's the person I'm falling for." "Julia?" "I know this is complicated. I know there are risks. But I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions." I squeezed his fingers. For the first time in years, I feel like myself. "You gave me that. However this started, whatever the circumstances were, it's become something real. At least for me." Dominic pulled me up and into his arms, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. "It's real for me too. More real than anything I've felt in years." We stood there in the morning sunlight, holding each other, and I knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. But Tyler wasn't going to disappear quietly, and what came next would test everything Dominic and I had built. It would force me to become someone I never thought I could be, a woman who fights back. The call came during breakfast on a Tuesday morning. Dominic's phone buzzed against the kitchen table, and I watched his expression shift from relaxed to guarded in seconds. He answered in Italian, his voice clipped and professional as he stepped away toward the windows. When he returned, his jaw was tight. He sat across from me, both hands wrapped around his coffee cup like he needed something to anchor him. "That was Leon," he said carefully. "He's been keeping an eye on your situation, making sure there are no complications." My stomach dropped. Tyler. The peace I'd found was about to shatter. Because Tyler had never been the type to let go. "He's been asking questions at the hospital. Showed up twice last week looking for you. Rhonda told him you were on extended medical leave and she had no other information." Dominic's dark eyes held mine. He's becoming more persistent, more aggressive in his inquiries. I set down my cup before my shaking hands could spill it. 3 weeks of peace and I'd let myself believe maybe Tyler had given up, moved on to some other target. Deep down, I'd known better. "What did he say to Rhonda?" "That you'd stolen from him. That he needed to find you to press charges." Dominic's voice was calm, but I heard the anger underneath. "Rhonda didn't believe him. Told him to contact the police if he had a legitimate complaint. He left. But Leon's sources say he's been watching the hospital entrance during shift changes. He's looking for me. It wasn't a question. Yes. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The gardens stretched out peaceful and green, a stark contrast to the anxiety clawing up my throat. I knew he wouldn't just let me go. Men like Tyler, they see people as possessions. You don't get to leave until they decide you're no longer useful. Dominic came to stand beside me, close but not touching. I have a proposal, something concrete that might help. I'm listening. What Dominic proposed next would change everything. It would give me legal protection, but more importantly, it would give me my voice back. Let me connect you with lawyers, good ones, who specialize in protective orders and domestic violence cases. They can file for a restraining order on your behalf. Legal documentation that Tyler is to stay away from you, the hospital, anywhere you might be. Restraining orders are just paper. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. They don't actually stop anyone determined enough. No, they don't. His honesty was almost refreshing. But they create legal consequences if he violates them, and they establish a record. If anything happens, there's documentation of the threat he poses. I turned to face him. You've been thinking about this, planning. I've been preparing for the possibility. Yes. He met my gaze steadily. The moment you told me about him, I knew this might become necessary. I wanted to have options ready when you needed them. In the past, someone planning around me without my input would have felt controlling, suffocating. But Dominic wasn't deciding for me. He was providing tools and letting me choose whether to use them. Okay, I said. Call the lawyers. Let's file for the restraining order. Within hours, Dominic had arranged everything. The lawyers, Victoria Chen and her associate Preston Wade, drove out to meet us that afternoon. They were professional, efficient, and most importantly, kind. Victoria sat across from me at Dominic's dining table, her tablet open and ready. I need you to tell me everything. Every incident of abuse, every threat, every time he made you feel unsafe. It's going to be uncomfortable, but the more detail we have, the stronger the case. So I told her. Every humiliating detail, every moment of pain, every time I'd made excuses for Tyler's violence. This was my testimony, my truth, so I told her. About the first time Tyler hit me, 8 months into our relationship when I'd forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning. How he'd apologized profusely afterward, brought flowers, sworn it would never happen again. About the escalation, the patterns, the way he always found reasons to blame me for his violence. The glass he'd thrown. The nights he'd kept me awake interrogating me about imagined infidelities. The control over money, over my schedule, over everything. Victoria took notes, her expression neutral but her eyes compassionate. Dominic sat beside me, silent support I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. This is a strong case, Victoria said when I finished. Multiple incidents, documented injuries from the hospital, witnesses who can attest to your fear. We'll file the petition tomorrow morning. There will be a hearing within 2 weeks. Probably sooner given the immediacy of the threat. Will I have to see him? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Yes, you'll both need to be present for the hearing, but you'll be in a courtroom with security and a judge. He won't be able to approach you. I'll be there, Dominic said. In the gallery. You won't be alone. The hearing was scheduled. 9 days until I'd have to face Tyler in court. 9 days until I'd have to look him in the eye and tell the world what he'd done to me. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, 9 days away. 9 days of existing in limbo, knowing Tyler would be served with papers, knowing his rage would escalate at being challenged. Dominic didn't leave my side during those days. He worked from home, kept his phone nearby. made sure Leon or one of the other security was always present. I should have felt smothered. Instead, I felt protected. The morning of the hearing, I dressed with care. Gray pantsuit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back neat and professional. I wanted to look competent, credible, not like a victim, even though that's exactly what I was. "You ready?" Dominic asked as Leon pulled the car around. "No, but I'm going anyway." The courthouse was downtown Manhattan, all marble and echoing hallways. Victoria met us in the lobby, Preston beside her with a leather briefcase. "Tyler and his lawyer are already here," Victoria said quietly. "Courtroom C, 3rd floor. We go in. You sit at our table. You answer the judge's questions honestly. That's it." My hands were shaking as we rode the elevator up. Dominic touched my elbow gently. "Breathe. You've got this." The courtroom doors opened, and there he was. The man who'd broken me down piece by piece. The man I was about to finally stand up to. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Tyler sat at the defense table with a middle-aged man in a cheap suit. When I walked in, Tyler's head snapped up. Our eyes met. He looked the same. Dark blonde hair, ordinary features, the kind of face that blended into crowds. Nothing about him screamed danger. That was part of what made him so effective. His eyes narrowed when he saw me. Then his gaze shifted past me to Dominic, who'd taken a seat in the first row. Even from across the room, I saw Tyler's expression change. Recognition of a different kind of threat. Judge Rivera called the proceedings to order, and I forced myself to breathe, to remember why I was here, to finally fight back. If Tyler's manipulation makes your blood boil, if you've ever known someone who hides their cruelty behind charm, hit that subscribe button. Because this story is about more than just Julia and Dominic. It's about exposing the toxic men who think they own the women they claim to love. Tell us in the comments, have you ever had to stand up to someone like Tyler? Let's break the silence together. The courtroom became a battleground. Not of violence, but of truth. And for the first time in 2 years, I was going to make Tyler hear mine. Victoria presented our case methodically, medical records showing injuries consistent with assault. My testimony about specific incidents. Photos of bruises I documented on my phone before deleting them out of fear Tyler would find them. Tyler's lawyer objected repeatedly, called me dramatic, suggested I'd injured myself for attention. Standard defense tactics that made my blood boil, but which Judge Rivera seemed to see right through. "Mr. Brennan," the judge said finally, addressing Tyler directly. "Do you deny striking Miss Hartman on multiple occasions?" Tyler's expression was earnest, apologetic. The mask I knew so well. "Your Honor, Julia and I had a volatile relationship. There were arguments, yes, but I never intended to hurt her. She's exaggerating normal couple disagreements. Normal couples don't send their partners to the emergency room with cracked ribs," Judge Rivera said flatly. "That was an accident. She fell during an argument." "An argument where you threw a glass bottle at her head?" Tyler's jaw tightened. "She's lying." Judge Rivera had heard enough. And what she said next would give me the first real protection I'd had in 2 years. Judge Rivera reviewed the paperwork before her. "I've seen enough. Miss Hartman's request for a restraining order is granted. Mr. Brennan, you are to stay at least 500 feet away from Miss Hartman at all times. You may not contact her directly or through intermediaries. You may not visit her place of employment. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand?" Tyler's face flushed red. "This is ridiculous. She's manipulating." "Do you understand, Mr. Brennan?" "Yes." The word came out through clenched teeth. We filed out of the courtroom, Victoria explaining next steps and what the order meant practically. I barely heard her. Relief made my legs weak. Outside the courtroom, Tyler was waiting. His lawyer was nowhere in sight. He stepped into our path. Julia. His voice was low, meant only for me. This isn't over. You think some piece of paper protects you? You think running to your rich boyfriend keeps you safe? Leon appeared from nowhere, positioning himself between us. Victoria immediately pulled out her phone. Mr. Brennan, you are currently violating the restraining order issued less than 5 minutes ago. I suggest you leave immediately or I will call courthouse security. Julia. Tyler tried again, his eyes finding mine over Leon's shoulder. You know you belong to me. You know. This was Tyler's fatal mistake, threatening me in front of witnesses, showing everyone the mask he'd worn so carefully for so long. Dominic's voice cut through, quiet but absolute. Walk away. Tyler's gaze shifted to Dominic, who'd moved to stand beside me. The two men sized each other up. Tyler, average height and build, aging poorly from alcohol and anger. Dominic, tall and composed, radiating controlled danger that didn't need to announce itself. Who the hell are you? Tyler demanded. Someone who keeps his promises. Dominic's hand found the small of my back, protective without being possessive. And I promised Julia you wouldn't hurt her again. I don't break promises. There was no explicit threat, no mention of violence or consequences, just certainty delivered in a tone that made Tyler's bravado crack visibly. This is harassment, Tyler blustered, but he was already backing away. I'll file a complaint. Please do. Victoria's phone was up, clearly recording. I'm sure the courthouse would be interested in hearing how you approached Miss Hartman immediately after being ordered to stay away. Tyler left. Not because he wanted to, but because even he recognized when he was outmatched. But the restraining order was just the beginning. What Dominic had planned next would ensure Tyler never came near me again. That night, back at the country house, Dominic poured himself whiskey and me tea. We sat in his study as rain began pattering against windows. There's something else, he said carefully. Something I need to tell you about Tyler. My stomach tightened. What? I've had investigators researching him since the day you told me his name. He met my gaze steadily. They've uncovered financial crimes, corporate fraud, tax evasion, wire fraud. Real crimes with serious federal penalties. You've been investigating Tyler? I should have been shocked. Should have protested the invasion of privacy. Instead, I felt only cold satisfaction. I can make sure the right evidence reaches the right people, he said. Tyler goes to prison, not for hitting you, but for stealing from his employer and the government. 5 years minimum, possibly more. I stood, moving to the window. Rain streaked the glass. Restraining orders can be violated. He's already proven that. Yes. But if he's in prison, you're safe. Genuinely, completely safe. For years. Dominic came to stand beside me. I'm not asking you to decide right now, but I need your permission. I won't do this without it. This was justice. Not the kind the courts would give me, but the kind that would actually keep me safe. The kind that would make Tyler face real consequences for once in his life. I thought about Tyler free to stalk me, to violate the restraining order again and again, about the next woman he'd charm and then systematically destroy, about finally, truly being free. Do it, I said. Within days, federal agents arrested Tyler. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing fraudulent transactions, tax documents with obvious discrepancies, email trails documenting his schemes. All delivered anonymously to the FBI. All completely legitimate proof he'd been too arrogant to hide properly. The trial was quick. Tyler's public defender was overwhelmed. The prosecution had everything documented, organized, irrefutable. Guilty on all counts. 5 years in federal prison. No possibility of early parole for at least 3. I sat in that courtroom and watched Tyler get led away in handcuffs. Watched him look back at me with rage and disbelief. Watched him finally face consequences. The weight I'd carried for months lifted from my shoulders. That evening, Dominic asked what I wanted now. Did I want my own place? To resume independent life? I looked at this man who'd caught me when I fell, who'd given me space to heal, who'd used his power not to control me, but to set me free. I want to stay with you, I said. Not because I'm obligated or scared, because this is where I want to be. Because I love you. I love you too, he responded. Have been since the beginning. And for the first time in years, I believed in happy endings. 8 months can feel like a lifetime when you're healing. And sometimes, the greatest love stories aren't about the moment you meet, but about the life you build together afterward. 8 months passed like a dream I kept waiting to wake from. But I didn't wake. This was real. This was my life now. I'd completed my pediatric nursing certification, passing the exam on my first try. The clinic Dominic helped fund in Brooklyn was exactly what I'd always wanted, helping children and families who desperately needed quality care. Patients who couldn't afford private practices but deserved the same compassion and skill. I was strong now. Healthy. I'd gained back the weight I'd lost, slept through nights without nightmares, laughed without fear of consequences. I had my own money, my own career, my own life beyond Dominic. And I chose him anyway, not from gratitude or dependency, from love. This was the transformation Tyler had tried to prevent, the woman I'd become in spite of his abuse, because of Dominic's patience, because of my own resilience. We split our time between the country house and his penthouse. Sometimes I'd wake in the city and watch sunrise over Central Park. Other mornings, I'd open my eyes to birdsong and trees and Dominic beside me, reading with that intense focus he brought to everything. I have something to ask you, he said one morning in the country house garden. November again, almost a full year since that night on the subway. Leaves crunched under our feet as we walked. My heart stuttered. Okay. He stopped walking, turning to face me, pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. This isn't a traditional proposal. I'm not asking you to marry me next month or even next year. He opened the box. An emerald ring, the exact shade of the sweater I'd been wearing the night we met, set in white gold with tiny diamonds surrounding it. The emerald, the same color as the shirt I'd been wearing when I collapsed. When everything changed. When my real life finally began. I'm asking if you'll let me promise you a future, he continued. At whatever pace feels right. If you'll wear this as a symbol that we're building towards something permanent. Tears blurred my vision. Dominic, I love you, Julia. I want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of my life. Want to support your dreams and share mine with you. Want everything that comes with forever. His dark eyes held mine. But I know you're still healing, still finding yourself again. I don't want to rush you or pressure you, so this isn't an engagement. It's a promise of my intention, of my commitment, of my certainty that you're the one I want. I held out my left hand, watching as he slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, the emerald catching light like captured fire. I love you too, I whispered. And yes, to the promise, to the future, to all of it. 6 months later, we married. Small ceremony at the country house. Dominic's inner circle. Silas, Bianca, Theo, and Iris. My hospital colleagues, including Rhonda, who cried through the entire thing. Isabel had outdone herself with flowers from the garden. I wore a simple cream dress and carried wildflowers. Dominic looked at me like I was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. We honeymooned in Italy, 2 weeks exploring Rome and Florence and the Amalfi Coast. He showed me where he'd grown up, introduced me to distant cousins who welcomed me with overwhelming warmth. I finally understood his roots, saw the country that had shaped him before New York had sharpened him. Coming home felt right. Not like returning from paradise to reality, but coming back to the life we'd built together. But the story wasn't quite finished. Because life has a way of bringing you back to where you started, to remind you how far you've come. November came around again. 1 year since that rainy night when I'd fainted on a subway train and landed in the arms of a stranger who would become everything. I want to go back, I told Dominic over breakfast. To the subway station, where it all started. He understood immediately. Tonight? That evening, Leon drove us into the city. We descended the same stairs I'd stumbled down a year ago. Exhausted and starving and terrified. The platform looked exactly the same. Same dingy tiles, same fluorescent lighting, same sense of barely controlled chaos. I was standing right here, Dominic said, pointing. Heading home from a meeting. Exhausted and irritated because the negotiations hadn't gone well. I was over there. I pointed to where I'd been gripping the pole. Could barely stay upright. Everything was spinning. We stood there as trains came and went, commuters flowing around us. Dominic's arm came around my waist, pulling me close. Best thing that ever happened to me, he said. You falling into my arms literally and metaphorically both. We walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench overlooking a playground that was empty in the gathering darkness. I have something to tell you, I said, my heart suddenly racing. Dominic turned to face me, expression attentive. What is it? And just like that, our story came full circle. From the moment he caught me falling, to the moment I told him about the new life we'd created together. I pulled the pregnancy test from my jacket pocket. I'd taken it that morning, stared at the 2 pink lines for a full minute before accepting they were real. I'm pregnant, 2 months along. For a long moment, he just stared at the test. Then his eyes found mine, and I saw tears gathering there. Dominic Castellano, who commanded respect through presence alone, who'd built an empire through strength and strategy, was crying. Julia. His voice broke on my name. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. We're having a baby. We're having a baby, I confirmed, laughing and crying simultaneously. We drove to the country house, sat on the back porch wrapped in blankets as dawn approached, talked about baby names and nursery colors and what kind of parents we wanted to be. When the sun finally rose, painting everything in shades of pink and gold, Dominic's hand rested on my still flat stomach. Thank you for catching me when I fell, I whispered. Thank you for letting me, he responded. For choosing me. For building this life with me. For giving me a reason to be better. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, hollow-eyed and starving, trapped in the slowest drowning imaginable. Convinced she had no options, no future, no hope. I thought about the man beside me, who'd recognized pain because he'd lived through it, who'd offered safety without demands, who'd shown me that love doesn't have to hurt. We'd saved each other. Not in some dramatic, instantaneous way, but gradually, carefully, through choice after choice after choice. This was happiness. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of love strong enough to face whatever came next. Together. Always together. The sun rose higher, warming our skin. Somewhere in the house, Isabel was probably making breakfast. Leon would arrive soon to check on security. Life would continue with all its complications and challenges. But right now, in this moment, wrapped in Dominic's arms with our baby growing inside me, I was finally, completely at peace.